hello everybody. Hi, welcome in. I'm Sam and you... no, I was about to say, despite all efforts, no, we're here. And you can't stop us. You're listening to Chilliteracy. Hello, welcome. I don't really know, the brain's already grabbing the wheel and taking us places I hadn't really thought about. Hi, welcome. It's going to be like this evening. Yeah. You were chill and have tea? Great. I'm glad to hear that, Arian. Thunder, thank you very much for the resub. For all 43 months of it. I hope it's okay. I did laugh at the end of your message. Not in a mean-spirited way. I need to stress that. But you are all loved, whether you know it or not right now. I don't have the words left of me today, so I shall leave you with a quote from one of my favorite K-pop band members, Yosang, and then nothing. And I saw you put the rest of the message in afterwards, but just I shall leave you with my favorite quote. Boom. Moon walks out. I don't know, I found that funny. But yes, I hope you have a happy day. I hope everyone has a happy day. Frankly, a lot of people deserve a happier day than a lot of people are getting at the moment. Lady Mephistopheles, that looks like good news about the cat. I am glad to hear it. I hope that, like Lucy, I hope that continues. It cut you off. It did. I know, and I'm sorry. As I said, I do not mean to laugh at your distress. But the nature of the way that played out was quite funny to me. I hope that's okay. Queek, hello, welcome in. And Parola also, and Llama, and anyone else. There was Ray Tracer rolling in first. So you can sit wherever you like, Ray Tracer. Everyone else, second places. Hubris, also, hello, welcome in. Alright. The whole gang's here, more or less, give or take. And other such expressions. Yeah, it's some form of Saturday for most of us. Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that. Thank you. Exactly. We're getting the old band back together. We'll call it a Saturday, on average. I'm dropping frames again. Why? We found tonight's topic. We're not reading. It's Sam rants about this for the next 2 hours. It has to be something, some option or toggle in the specific settings that I use on Chilliteracy that I'm going to have to remember to dig through and change. Because I can stream on Longest John's Gaming without a problem and no dropped frames for 2, 3, 4 hours, 5 hours, 9 hours. It depends. And yeah, as soon as I start on this one, something breaks, and it's either this channel or it is my settings on OBS for this channel. 24 hours, I haven't done that yet. But I might be at some point in the near future, which I'm dreading. Yeah, like 10 seasons today. It's been lovely here today. It's been nice. I have had the windows open and Joey shut out of the room. And I have cleaned the bathroom. Yeah! I mean, it needed doing. But, that's a good way to celebrate a nice day. And in what will in what will sound like just a frivolous waste of the evening, rather than sit at my computer and play video games like I could have done before the stream, I just lay on the bed with the lights off, looking out the window, and Joey snuggled up next to me, and I'll be honest, in this weather, that's a good evening. That was nice. I was quite happy with that. So that's been my evening, honestly. Pretty good. Yeah, that's the thing. Sometimes when I do that, I like the reason I'm focusing in on that and almost bigging myself up for doing that is because sometimes when I do that, it's almost sort of a borderline depressive kind of state of I literally don't feel an impulse to do anything, so I'm just going to lie here and let time pass me by. Which, It's not great and doesn't leave me feeling great at the end. So to be able to do that and actually just be like, yeah, that was nice. It feels good, actually. So, we take those. Joe, sorry, I can see the reflection. He's just sort of woken up, but is trying to go back to sleep. So he's like sitting up. He's got his head up, but his eyes are shut, like he's about to just bonk out again. Right over there, buddy. Talking. I'm making noise in the room. Are you okay? Over. You thinking about it? Yeah. All right. Hey. Well. Yeah. Oh, Simone Yach's new puzzle. It's only edge pieces. Yeah, I saw like a picture of it on the thumbnail for the video the other day and thought, I know exactly what that is. I don't need to send this to anyone who would be interested in it because they will have, as now proven, already seen it. Oh, good. It does sound weird. It sounds barbaric. But yes. Hi. Hello. I have 2 stories for you tonight. Ones that I had readied to read on Wednesday, and then decided at the last minute, nah, I'm not feeling up to that, so I didn't. And instead, we intended to play, as just an evening of cancelled plans, intended to play Road Warden, and didn't, because it kept flickering and going weird, and so in the end we played 80 Days, and I think people enjoyed that. I had fun with it. It's a good game. But now, this evening, we have instead what I was going to read the other day, the first of which is The Man Who Kept His Money in a Box. Checking I've put that correctly everywhere, because my brain just went to substitute in bag, but it is not. He kept his money in a box. Andy, hello, welcome in. Twitch didn't ding you, you're late. Well, that's okay, we weren't really saying too much about you that you don't already know. That's what happened, you already forgot. This is me trying to remind myself. Usually once something has happened, that's it. We can just forget about that. So it takes a bit of an effort to remind myself of things. Yeah, both these stories tonight come from my fancy folio edition of English short stories. It has a whole bunch of English short stories, including other ones that we've already done on stream, which I think Lucy's done, such as The Lady of Glenwith Grange, Wilkie Collins. I'm pretty sure Lucy's read that one. I've done The Tugs at Ramsgate from here as well. That was good. Oh, Whistle and I'll Come to You, My Lad, Mr. James. What else? I don't know. I don't think I recognise any other ones. But yeah, it's a very fancy one. So I have, unfortunately, ever so slightly, minimally in a couple of places, please don't judge or shout at me, slightly defaced 1 or 2 of the pages with very small pronunciation guides or like a word replacement, because there is, and I've just had to flick through to remind myself because I read this a few days ago. There is a word that is used, I think, somewhere towards the end of the story in this, which in its use isn't an offensive or derogatory term, but is close enough sounding to... It's basically, I'm trying to think how to explain this without just telling you what the word is. It's an old-timey... Well, basically, what the word that we Brits tend to use as a slang term for cigarette, that in the sort of the definition of it meaning works. So I've just dropped that word and we'll just say worked instead. If you happen to be reading along and notice that discrepancy, that's why. Just because, you know, words being what they are, and so on. I don't want to say something that could, to some, sound like a homophobic slur. So, with that covered, do I have anything else to say? No. Here we go, I guess. Expect flubs and mistakes. I'm not entirely with it this evening. That's just me and my general frame of mind at the moment. I apologise in advance, but, you know, we're going to do our best and see how we go. No worries on it. As I say, it isn't that... that's the thing, it's not as straightforward as not saying a slur. Because to me, that would be if the word were being used in the story in the sense of a slur. Like if someone were literally saying the word to use it as a homophobic slur, I would be a lot more uncomfortable about that. But because it is an old-timey word that is written, spelt, and pronounced in a similar fashion to a word that is used as it's a complicated one, and I'm probably spending far too long talking about it. Yeah, and now Joey wants to leave. He's had enough. Okay. Sit a little more comfortably. I do need to get a quieter chair that is in fewer pieces. Right. It's a word that has perfectly inoffensive uses, but where it is fraught, it's very fraught. Yes, exactly. And so it's just... It is my choice as reader to just be like, there is another perfectly good word that we can use in here. I don't think it's altering the tone or feel of the story too much. At all, even. So we'll just do that and save everyone some hassle and a headache. Am I still using the broken chair? You know it. I do have a replacement lined up, I just haven't got it yet. So we'll see how that goes. Right. Well, we have now this long-promised story and see how it goes. Wow. Sorry. I had shut the book. You can't see this, but this totally happened. I had shut the book, and then, without putting a bookmark in there, and then literally just, like, pulled it open and kind of riffled through with my thumb to the exact page of the start of the story, with no bookmark or indicator where that was, and impressed myself. So, alright. If we are all ready, we've had a good 20 minutes of talk and preamble and faff. Shall we have a story? Shall we have our first story for this evening? This is by Anthony Trollope, The Man Who Kept His Money in a Box. I first saw the man who kept his money in a box in the midst of the ravine of the Via Mala. I interchanged a few words with him or with his wife at the hospice at the top of the Splugen, and I became acquainted with him in the courtyard of Conradi's hotel at Chiavenna. It was, however, afterwards at Bellagio, on the Lake of Como, that the acquaintance ripened into an intimacy. A good many years have rolled by since then, and I believe this episode in his life may be told without pain to the feelings of anyone. His name was... let us for the present say that his name was Green. How he learned that my name was Robinson I do not know, but I remember well that he addressed me by my name at Chiavenna. To go back, however, for a moment to the Via Mala, I had been staying for a few days at the Golden Eagle at Tersis, which, by the by, I hold to be the best small inn in all Switzerland, and its hostess to be, or to have been, certainly the prettiest landlady, and on the day of my departure southward I had walked on into the Via Mala, so that the diligence might pick me up in the gorge. This pass I regard as one of the grandest spots to which my wandering steps have ever carried me, and though I had already lingered about it for many hours, I now walked thither again to take my last farewell of its dark, towering rocks, its narrow causeway, and roaring river, trusting to my friend the landlady to see that my luggage was duly packed upon the diligence. I need hardly say that my friend did not betray her trust. As one goes out from Switzerland towards Italy, the road through the Via Mala ascends somewhat steeply, and passengers by their diligence may walk from the inn at Tircis into the gorge and make their way through the greater part of the ravine before the vehicle will overtake them. This, however, Mr. Green, with his wife and daughter, had omitted to do. When the diligence passed me in the defile, the horses trotting for a few yards over some level portion of the road, I saw a man's nose pressed against the glass of the coupe window. I saw more of his nose than any other part of his face, but yet I could perceive that his neck was twisted and his eye upturned, and that he was making a painful effort to look upwards to the summit of the rocks from his position inside the carriage. There was such a roar of wind and waters at the spot that it was not practicable to speak to him, but I beckoned with my finger and then pointed to the road, indicating that he should have walked. He understood me, though I did not at the moment understand his answering gesture. It was subsequently, when I knew somewhat of his habits, that he explained to me that in pointing to his open mouth he had intended to signify that he would be afraid of sore throat in exposing himself to the air of that damp and narrow passage. I got up into the conductor's covered seat at the back of the diligence, and in this position encountered the drifting snow of the Splugen. I think it is the coldest of all the passes. Near the top of the pass the diligence stops for a while, and it is here, if I remember, that the Austrian officials demand the travellers' passports. At least in those days they did so. These officials have now retreated behind the Quadrilatère, soon, as we hope, to make a further retreat, and the district belongs to the Kingdom of United Italy. There is a place of refreshment or hospice here, into which we all went for a few moments, and I then saw that my friend with the weak throat was accompanied by two ladies. "You should not have missed the Via Mala," I said to him as he stood warming his toes at the huge covered stove. "We miss everything." "We miss everything," said the elder of the two ladies, who, however, was very much younger than the gentleman, and not very much older than her companion. "I saw beautifully, mamma," said the younger one. Whereupon mamma gave her head a tap, and made up her mind, as I thought, to take some little vengeance before long upon her stepdaughter. I observed that Miss Green always called her stepmother mamma on the first approach of any stranger, so that the nature of the connection between them might be understood, and I observed also that the elder lady always gave her a tap on the head when she was so addressed. "We don't mean to enjoy ourselves till we get down to the Lake of Como," said Mr. Green. As I looked at him cowering over the stove, and saw how oppressed he was with greatcoats and warm wrappings for his throat, I quite agreed with him that he had not yet begun to enjoy himself as yet. Then we all got into our places again, and I saw no more of the Greens till we were all standing huddled together in the huge courtyard of Conradi's hotel at Chiavenna. Chiavenna is the first Italian town which the tourist reaches by this route, and I know no town in the north of Italy which is so closely surrounded by beautiful scenery. The traveller, as he falls down to it from the Splugen road, is bewildered by the loneliness of the valleys. That is to say, if he so arranges that he can see them without pressing his nose against the glass of a coach window. And then, from the town itself, there are walks of 2, 3, or 4 hours, which, I think, are unsurpassed for wild and sometimes startling beauties. One gets into little valleys, green as emeralds, and surrounded on all sides by grey, broken rocks, in which the Italian Rasselasses must have lived in perfect bliss. And then again one comes upon distant views up the river courses, bounded far away by the spurs of the Alps, which are perfect, to which the fancy can add no additional charm. Conradi's hotel also is by no means bad, or was not in those days. For my part, I am inclined to think that Italian hotels have received a worse name than they deserve, and I must profess that, looking merely to creature comforts, I would much sooner stay a week at the Golden Key at Chiavenna than with mine host of the King's Head in the thriving commercial town of Muddleborough on the borders of Yorkshire and Lancashire. I am always rather keen about my room in travelling, and having secured a chamber looking out upon the mountains, had returned to the courtyard to collect my baggage, before Mr. Green had succeeded in realizing his position or understanding that he had to take upon himself the duties of settling his family for the night in the hotel by which he was surrounded. When I descended, he was stripping off the outermost of 3 greatcoats, and 4 waiters around him were beseeching him to tell them what accommodation he would require. Mrs. Green was giving sundry very urgent instructions to the conductor respecting her boxes, but as these were given in English, I was not surprised to find that they were not accurately followed. The man, however, was much too courteous to say in any language that he did not understand every word that was said to him. Miss Green was standing apart, doing nothing. As she was only 18 years of age, it was, of course, her business to do nothing. And a very pretty girl she was, by no means ignorant of her own beauty, and possessed of quite sufficient art to enable her to make the most of it. Mr. Green was very leisurely in his proceedings, and the 4 waiters were almost reduced to despair. "I want 2 bedrooms, a dressing-room, and some dinner," he said at last, speaking very slowly, and in his own vernacular. I could not in the least assist him by translating it into Italian, for I did not speak a word of the language myself, but I suggested that the men would understand French. The waiter, however, had understood English. Waiters do understand all languages with a facility that is marvellous, and this one now suggested that Mrs. Green should follow him upstairs. Mrs. Green, however, would not move till she had seen that her boxes were all right, and as Mrs. Green was also a pretty woman, I found myself bound to apply myself to her assistance. "Oh, thank you," said she. "The people are so stupid that one can really do nothing with them. And as for Green, he is of no use at all. For see that box, the smaller one? I have £400 worth of jewellery in that, and therefore I am obliged to look after it." "Indeed?" said I, rather startled at this amount of confidence on rather a short acquaintance. "In that case I do not wonder at your being careful. But is it not rather rash? Perhaps I know what you are going to say. Well, perhaps it is rash, but when you are going to foreign courts, what are you to do? If you have got those sorts of things, you must wear them." As I was not myself possessed of any things of that sort, and had no intention of going to any foreign court, I could not argue the matter with her, but I assisted her in getting together an enormous pile of luggage, among which there were 7 large boxes covered with canvas, such as ladies not uncommonly carry with them when travelling. That one which she represented as being smaller than the others, and as holding her jewellery, might be about a yard long by a foot and by a foot and a half deep. Being ignorant of those matters, I should have thought it sufficient to carry all a lady's wardrobe for 12 months. When the boxes were collected together, she sat down upon the jewel case and looked up into my face. She was a pretty woman, perhaps 30 years of age, with long, light yellow hair, which she allowed to escape from her bonnet, knowing, perhaps, that it was not unbecoming to her when thus dishevelled. Her skin was very delicate, and her complexion good. Indeed, her face would have been altogether prepossessing had there not been a want of gentleness in her eyes. Her hands, too, were soft and small, and on the whole she may be said to have been possessed of a strong battery of feminine attractions. She also well knew how to use them. whisper, she said to me, with a peculiar but very proper aspiration on the whisper, and both by the aspiration and the use of the word I knew at once from what island she had come. Mr. Green keeps all his money in the box also, so I never let it go out of my sight for a moment. But whatever you do, don't tell him I told you so. I laid my hand on my heart and made a solemn asseveration that I would not divulge her secret. I need not, however, have troubled myself much on that head, for as I walked upstairs, keeping my eye upon the precious trunk, Mr. Green addressed me. "You are an Englishman, Mr. Robinson," said he. I acknowledged that I was. Joey would like to come back into the room 1 second. Yeah. And where do you want to be? Thinking about it. Do you want to jump up? You do? Hello. Gonna let me carry on reading? Find where I was again. No, you just want to go in the box. Yep, he's going to go in the cube. Where was I? Just read asseveration. And some words after it. Right. As I walked upstairs, keeping an eye upon the precious trunk, Mr. Green addressed me. "You are an Englishman, Mr. Robinson," said he. I acknowledged that I was. "I am another. My wife, however, is Irish. My daughter, by a former marriage, is English also. You see that box there? Do you, Joey? There's a cat in it." "Oh, yes," said I see it." I began to be so fascinated by the box that I could not keep my eyes off it. "I don't know whether or not it is prudent, but I keep all my money there. My money for travelling, I mean." "If I were you, then," I answered, "I would not say anything about it to anyone." "Oh, no, of course not," said he. "I should not think of mentioning it. But those brigands in Italy always take away what you have about your person, and they don't meddle with the heavy luggage. But they don't meddle with the heavy luggage." "Bills of exchange or circular notes?" I suggested. "Ah, yes. And if you can't identify yourself, or happen to have a headache, you can't get them changed. I asked an old friend of mine, who has been connected with the Bank of England for the last 50 years, and he assured me that there was nothing like sovereigns." But you never quite get the value for them." "Well, not quite. One loses a franc, or a franc and a half. But still there's the certainty, and that's a great matter. An English sovereign will go anywhere." And he spoke these words with considerable triumph. "Undoubtedly, if you consent to lose a shilling on each sovereign. At any rate, I have got 350 in that box," he said. "I have them done up in rolls of £25 each." I again recommended him to keep this arrangement of his as private as possible, a piece of counsel which I confess seemed to me to be much needed, and then I went away to my own room, having first accepted an invitation from Mrs. Green to join their party at dinner. "Do," said she. "We have been so dull, and it will be so pleasant." I did not require to be much pressed to join myself to a party in which there was so pretty a girl as Miss Green, and so attractive a woman as Mrs. Green. I therefore accepted the invitation readily, and went away to make my toilet. As I did so, I passed the door of Mrs. Green's room, and saw the long file of boxes being borne into the centre of it. I spent a pleasant evening with, however, 1 or 2 slight drawbacks. As to old Green himself, he was all that was amiable, but then he was nervous, full of cares, and somewhat apt to be a bore. He wanted information on 1,000 points, and did not seem to understand that a young man might prefer the conversation of his daughter to his own. Not that he showed any solicitude to prevent conversation on the part of his daughter. I should have been perfectly at liberty to talk to either of the ladies, had he not wished to engross all my attention to himself. He also had found it dull to be alone with his wife and daughter for the last 6 weeks. He was a small, spare man, probably over 50 years of age, who gave me to understand that he had lived in London all his life, and had made his own fortune in the city. What he had done in the city to make his fortune he did not say. Had I come across him there, I should no doubt have found him to be a sharp man of business, quite competent to teach me many a useful lesson, of which I was as ignorant as an infant. Had he caught me on the Exchange, or at Lloyd's, or at the big rooms of the Bank of England, I should have been compelled to ask him everything. Now, in this little town under the Alps, he was as much lost as I should have been in Lombard Street, and he was ready enough to look to me for information. I was by no means chary in giving him my counsel, and imparting to him my ideas on things in general in that part of the world. Only I should have preferred to be allowed to make myself civil to his daughter. In the course of the conversation it was much mentioned by him that they intended to stay a few days at Bellagio, which, as all the world knows, is a central spot on the Lake of Como, and a famous resting place for travellers. There are 3 lakes, which all meet there, and to all of which we give the name of Como. They are properly called the Lakes of Como, Colico and Lecco, and Bellagio. And Bellagio is the spot at which their waters join each other. I had half made up my mind to sleep there one night on my road into Italy, and now, on hearing their purpose, I declared that such was my intention. "How very pleasant," said Mrs. Green. "It would be quite delightful to have someone to show us how to settle ourselves, for really, my dear, I'm sure you can't say that you ever have much trouble." "And who does then, Mr. Green? I'm sure Sophonisba does not do much to help me." "You won't let me," said Sophonisba, whose name I had not before heard. Her papa had called her Sophie in the yard of the inn. Sophonisba Green. Sophonisba Robinson did not sound so badly in my ears, and I confess that I had tried the names together. Her papa had mentioned to me that he had no other child, and had mentioned also that he had made his fortune. And then there was a little family contest as to the amount of travelling labour which fell to the lot of each of the party, during which I retired to one of the windows of the big front room in which we were sitting. And how much of this labour there is incidental to a tourist's pursuits, and how often these little contests do arise upon a journey. Who has ever travelled and not known them? I had taken up such a position at the window as might, I thought, have removed me from out of hearing, but nevertheless, from time to time, a word would catch my ears about that precious box. "I have never taken my eyes off it since I left England," said Mrs. Green, speaking quick and with a considerable brogue superinduced by her energy. "Where would it have been at Basel if I had not been looking after it?" "Quite safe," said Sophonisba. "Those large things are always safe." "Are they, miss? That's all you know about it. I suppose your bonnet box is quite safe when I found it on the platform at I forget the name of the place." Friedrichshafen?" said Sophonisba, with almost an unnecessary amount of Teutonic skill in her pronunciation. "Well, mamma, you've told me of that at least 20 times. Soon after that, the ladies took them to their own rooms, weary with the travelling of 2 days and a night, and Mr. Green went fast asleep on the very comfortless chair on which he was seated. At 4 o'clock the next morning we started on our journey. Early to bed and early to rise is the way to be healthy and wealthy and wise. We all know that lesson, and many of us believe in it. But if the lesson be true, the Italians ought to be the healthiest and wealthiest and wisest of all men and women. 3 and 4 o'clock seems to them quite a natural hour for commencing the day's work. Why, we should have started from Chiavenna at 4 o'clock, in order that we might be kept waiting on the boat for an hour and a half on the little quay at Colico. I don't know. But such was our destiny. There we remained for an hour and a half, Mrs. Green sitting pertinaciously on the one important box. He had designated it as being smaller than the others, and as all the 7 were now ranged in a row, I had an opportunity of comparing them. It was something smaller, perhaps an inch less high and an inch and a half shorter. She was a sharp woman, and observed my scrutiny. "I always know it," she said in a loud whisper, "by this little hole in the canvas." And she put her finger on a slight rent on one of the ends. "As for Green, if one of those Italian brigands were to walk off with it on his shoulders before his eyes, you wouldn't be the wiser. How helpless you men are, Mr. Robinson." "It is well for us that we have women to look after us." "But you have got no woman to look after you, or perhaps you have left her behind?" "No, indeed. I am all alone in the world as yet. But it's not my own fault. I have asked half a dozen." "Now, Mr. Robinson." And in this way the time passed on the quay at Colico, till the boat came and took us away. I should have preferred to pass my time in making myself agreeable to the younger lady, but the younger lady stood aloof, turning up her nose, as I thought, at her mamma. I will not attempt to describe the scenery about Colico. The little town itself is one of the vilest places under the sun, having no accommodation for travellers, and being excessively unhealthy. But there is very little either north or south of the Alps, and perhaps I may add very little elsewhere, to beat the beauty of the mountains which cluster round the head of the lake. When we had sat upon those boxes for that hour and a half, we were taken on board the steamer which had been lying off a little way from the shore, and then we commenced our journey. Of course, there was a good deal of exertion and care necessary in getting the packages off from the shore onto the boat, and I observed that anyone with half an eye in his head might have seen that the mental anxiety expended on that one box, which was marked by the small hole in the canvas, far exceeded that which was extended to all the other 6 boxes. "They deserve that it should be stolen," I said to myself, "for being such fools." And then we went down to breakfast in the cabin. "I suppose it must be safe," said Mrs. Green to me, ignoring the fact that the cabin waiter understood English, although she had just ordered some veal cutlets in that language. "As safe as a church," I replied, not wishing to give much apparent importance to the subject. "They can't carry it off here," said Mr. Green. But he was innocent of any attempt at a joke, and was looking at me with all his eyes. "They might throw it overboard," said Sophonisba. I at once made up my mind that she could not be a good-natured girl. The moment that breakfast was over, Mrs. Green returned again upstairs, and I found her seated on one of the benches near the funnel, from which she could keep her eyes fixed upon the box. "When one is obliged to carry about one's jewels with one must be careful, Mr. Robinson," she said to me apologetically. But I was becoming tired of the box, and the funnel was hot and unpleasant. Therefore I left her. I had made up my mind that Sophonisba was ill-natured, but nevertheless she was pretty, and I now went through some little manoeuvres with the object of getting into conversation with her. This I soon did, and was surprised by her frankness. "How tired you must be of Mamma and her box," she said to me. To this I made some answer, declaring that I was rather interested than otherwise in the safety of the precious trunk. "It makes me sick," said Sophonisba, "to hear her go on in that way to a perfect stranger. I heard what she said about her jewellery." "It is natural she should be anxious," I said, "seeing that it contains so much that is valuable." "Why does she bring them?" said Sophonisba. "She managed to live very well without jewels till Papa married her, about a year since, and now she can't travel about a month without lugging them with her everywhere. I should be so glad if someone would steal them." "But all Mr. Green's money is there also." "I don't want Papa to be bothered, but I declare I wish the box might be lost for a day or so. She is such a fool. Don't you think so, Mr. Robinson?" At this time it was just 14 hours since first I had made their acquaintance in the yard of Conradi's hotel, and of those 14 hours some half had been passed in bed. I must confess that I looked on Sophonisba as being almost more indiscreet than her stepmother. Nevertheless, she was not stupid, and I continued my conversation with her the greatest part of the way down the lake towards Bellagio. These steamers, which run up and down the Lake of Como and the Lago Maggiore, put out their passengers at all the towns on the banks of the water by means of small rowing boats, and the persons who are about to disembark generally have their own articles ready to their hands when their turn comes for leaving the steamer. As we came near to Bellagio, I looked up my own portmanteau, and, pointing to the beautiful wood-covered hill that stands at the fork of the waters, told my friend Green that he was near his destination. "I am very glad to hear it," he said complacently. But he did not, at the moment, busy himself about the boxes. Then the small boat ran up alongside the steamer, and the passengers for Como and Milan crowded up the side. "We have to go in that boat," I said to Green. "Nonsense!" he exclaimed. "Oh, but we have." "What? Put our boxes into that boat?" said Mrs. Green. "Oh, dear! Here, boatman, there are 7 of these boxes, all in white, like this," and she pointed to the one that had the hole in the canvas. "Make haste, and there are 3 bags and my dressing-case, and Mr. Green's portmanteau. Mr. Green, where is your portmanteau?" The boatman whom she addressed no doubt did not understand a word of English, but nevertheless he knew what she meant, and, being well accustomed to the work, got all the luggage together with an incredibly few number of moments. "If you will get down into the boat," I said, "I will see that the luggage follows you before I leave the dock." "I wish they would," Sophonisba whispered into my ear. "I won't stir," she said, "till I see that box lifted down. Take care you'll let it fall into the lake. I know you will." Mr. Green said nothing, but I could see that his eyes were as anxiously fixed on what was going on as were those of his wife. At last, however, the 3 Greens were in the boat, as also were all their packages, and I followed them, my portmanteau having gone down before me, and we pushed off for Bellagio. Up to this period most of the attendants around us had understood a word or 2 of English, but now it would be well if we could find someone whose ears French would not be unfamiliar, or to whose ears French would not be unfamiliar. As regarded Mr. Green and his wife, they, I found, must give up all conversation, as they knew nothing of any language but their own. Sophonisba could make herself understood in French, and was quite at home, as she assured me, in German. And then the boat was beached on the shore at Bellagio, and we all had to go again to work with the object of getting ourselves lodged at the hotel which overlooks the water. I had learned before that the Greens were quite free from any trouble in this respect, for their rooms had been taken for them before they left England. Trusting to this, Mrs. Green gave herself no inconsiderable airs the moment her foot was on the shore, and ordered the people about as though she were the lady paramount of Bellagio. Italians, however, are used to this from travellers of a certain description. They never resent such conduct, but simply put it down in the bill, with the other articles. Mrs. Green's words on this occasion were innocent enough, seeing that they were English, but had I been that head waiter who came down to the beach, with his nice black shiny hair and his napkin under his arm, I should have thought her manner very insolent. Indeed, as it was, I did think so, and was inclined to be angry with her. She was to remain for some time at Bellagio, and therefore it behooved her, as she thought, to assume the character of the grand lady at once. Hitherto she had been willing enough to do the work, but now she began to order about Mr. Green and Sophonisba, and, as it appeared to me, to order me about also. I did not quite enjoy this, so leaving her still among her luggage and satellites, I walked up to the hotel to see about my own bedroom. I had some seltzer water, stood at the window for 3 or 4 minutes, and then walked up and down the room. But still the Greens were not there. As I had put in at Bellagio solely with the object of seeing something more of Sophonisba, it would not do for me to quarrel with them, or to allow them to settle themselves in their private sitting-room that I should be excluded. So I returned again to the house by which they must come up, and met the procession near the house. Or to the road by which they must come up, and met the procession near the house. Excuse me. Mrs. Green was leading it with great majesty, the waiter with the shiny hair walking by her side to point out to her the way. Then came all the luggage, each porter carrying a white canvas-covered box. That which was so valuable, no doubt, was carried next to Mrs. Green, so that she might, at a moment's notice, put her eye upon the well-known valuable rent. I confess that I did not observe the whole as the train passed by me, nor did I count the number of boxes. 7 boxes, all alike, are very many, and then they were followed by 3 other men with the inferior articles, Mr. Green's portmanteau, the carpet-bags, etc. At the tail of the line I found Mr. Green, and behind him Sophonisba. "All your fatigues will be over now," I said to the gentleman, thinking it well not to be too particular in my attentions to his daughter. He was panting beneath a terrible greatcoat, having forgotten that the shores of an Italian lake are not so cold as the summits of the Alps, and did not answer me. "I'm sure I hope so," said Sophonisba, "and I shall advise Papa not to go any further unless he can persuade Mrs. Green to send her jewels home. Sophie, my dear," he said, "for heaven's sake let us have a little peace since we are here." From all which I gathered that Mr. Green had not been fortunate in his second matrimonial adventure. We then made our way slowly up to the hotel, having been altogether distanced by the porters, and when we reached the house we found that the different packages were already being carried away through the house, some this way and some that. Mrs. Green, the meanwhile, was talking loudly at the door of her own sitting-room. "Mr. Green," she said, as soon as she saw her heavily oppressed spouse, for the noonday sun was now up, "Mr. Green, where are you?" "Here, my dear," said, and Mr. Green threw himself panting into the corner of a sofa. "A little seltzer water and brandy?" I suggested. Mr. Green's inmost heart leapt at the hint, and nothing that his remonstrant wife could say would induce him to move, until he had enjoyed the delicious draught. In the meantime, the box with the hole in the canvas had been lost. Yes, when we came to look into matters, to count the packages, and to find out where we were, the box with the hole in the canvas was not there. Or, at any rate, Mrs. Green said it was not there. I worked hard to look it up, and even went into Sophonisba's bedroom in my search. In Sophonisba's bedroom there was but one canvas-covered box. "That is my own," said she, "and it is all that I have except this bag." "Where on earth can it be?" said I, sitting down on the trunk in question. At the moment I almost thought that she had been instrumental in hiding it. "How am I to know?" she answered, and I fancied that even she was dismayed. "What a fool that woman is!" "The box must be in the house," I said. "Do find it, for Papa's sake, there's a good fellow. He will be so wretched with his money. I heard him say that he had only £2 in his purse." "Oh, I can let him have money to go on with," I answered, grandly. And then I went off to prove that I was a good fellow, and searched throughout the house. 2 white boxes had by order been left downstairs, as they would not be needed, and these 2 were in a large cupboard off the hall, which was used expressly for stowing away luggage. And then there were 3 in Mrs. Green's bedroom, which had been taken there as containing the wardrobe which she would require while remaining at Bellagio. I searched every one of these myself, to see if I could find the hole in the canvas, but the hole in the canvas was not there, and, let me count as I would, I could make out only 6. Now there certainly had been 7 on board the steamer, though I could not swear that I had seen the 7 put into the small boat. "Mr. Green," said the lady, standing in the middle of her remaining treasures, all of which were now open, "you are worth nothing when travelling. Were you not behind?" But Mr. Green's mind was full, and he did not answer. "It has been stolen before your very eyes," she continued. "Nonsense, mamma," said Sophonisba. "If ever it came out of the steamboat, it certainly came into the house." "I saw it out of the steamer," said Mrs. Green, "and it certainly is not in the house. Mr. Robinson, may I trouble you to send for the police? At once, if you please, sir." I had been at Bellagio twice before, but nevertheless I was ignorant of their system of police. And then, again, I did not know what was the Italian for the word. "I will speak to the landlord," I said. "If you will have the goodness to send for the police at once, I will be obliged to you." And as she thus reiterated her command, she stamped with her foot upon the floor. "There are no police at Bellagio," said Sophonisba. "What on earth shall I do for money? To go on with?" said Mr. Green, looking piteously up to the ceiling and shaking both his hands. And now the whole house was in an uproar, including not only the landlord, his wife and daughters, and all the servants, but also every other visitor at the hotel. Mrs. Green was not a lady who hid either her glories or griefs under a bushel, and though she spoke only in English, she soon made her protestations sufficiently audible. She protested loudly that she had been robbed, and that she had been robbed since she left the steamer. The box had come on shore, of that she was quite certain. If the landlord had any regard either for his own character or for that of his house, he would ascertain, before an hour was over, where it was and who had been the thief. She would give him 1 hour, and then she sat herself down. But in 2 minutes she was up again, vociferating her wrongs as loudly as ever. All this was filtered through me and Sophonisba to the waiter in French, and from the waiter to the landlord. But the lady's gestures required no translations to make them intelligible, and the state of her mind was, I believe, perfectly well understood. Mr. Green I really did pity. His feeling of dismay seemed to be quite as deep, but his sorrow and solicitude was repressed with more decorum. "What am I to do for money?" he said. "I have not a shilling to go on with." And he still looked up at the ceiling. "You must send to England," said Sophonisba. "It will take a month," he replied. "Mr. Robinson will let you have what you want at present," added Sophonisba. Now, I certainly had said so, and had meant it at the time, but my whole travelling store did not exceed 40 or 50 pounds, with which I was going on to Venice, and then back to England through the Tyrol. Waiting a month for Mr. Green's money from England might be more inconvenient to me than even to him. Then it occurred to me that the wants of Mr. Green's family would be numerous and expensive, and that my small stock would go but a little way among so many. And what, also, if there had been no money and no jewels in that accursed box? I confess that at this moment such an idea did strike my mind. One hears of sharpers on every side committing depredations by means of most singular intrigues and contrivances. Might it not be possible that the whole batch of Greens belonged to this order of society? It was a base idea, I own, but I confess that I entertained it for a moment. I retired to my own room for a while, that I might think over all the circumstances. There certainly had been 7 boxes, and one had had a hole in the canvas. All the 7 had certainly been on board that steamer. To so much I felt that I might safely swear. I had not counted the 7 into the small boat, but on leaving the larger vessel I had looked about the deck to see that none of Mr. Green's trappings were forgotten. If left on the steamer, it had been so left through evil intent on the part of someone there employed. It was quite possible that the contents of the box had been ascertained through the imprudence of Mrs. Green, and that it had been conveyed away so that it might be rifled at Como. As to Mrs. Green's assertion that all the boxes had been put into the small boat, I thought nothing of it. The people at Bellagio could not have known which box to steal, nor had there been time to concoct the plan in carrying the boxes up to the hotel. I came at last to this conclusion, that the missing trunk had either been purloined and carried on to Como, in which case it would be necessary to lose no time in going after it, or that it had been put out of sight in some uncommonly clever way by the Greens themselves as an excuse for borrowing as much money as they could raise and living without payment of their bills. With reference to the latter hypothesis, I declared to myself that Green did not look like a swindler. But as to Mrs. Green, I confess that I did not feel so confident in regard to her. Charity begins at home, so I proceeded to make myself comfortable in my room, feeling almost certain that I should not be able to leave Bellagio on the following morning. I had opened my portmanteau when I first arrived, leaving it open on the floor, as is my wont. Some people are always being robbed and are always locking up everything, while others wander safe over the world and never lock up anything. For myself, I never have a key anywhere, and no one ever purloins from me even a handkerchief. Cantabit vacuus, and I am always sufficiently vacuous. Perhaps it is that I have not had a handkerchief worth the stealing. It is green, heavy-laden, suspicious, maladroit persons that the thieves attack. I now found that the accommodating Boots, who already knew my ways, had taken my portmanteau into a dark recess which was intended to do for a dressing-room, and had there spread my portmanteau open upon some table or stool in the corner. It was a convenient arrangement, and there I left it open during the whole period of my sojourn. Mrs. Green had given the landlord an hour to find the box, and during that time the landlord, the landlady, their 3 daughters, and all the servants in the house certainly did exert themselves to the utmost. 6 times they came to my door, but I was luxuriating in a washing-tub, making up for that 4 o'clock start from Chiavenna. I opened to them, however, but the box was not there, and so the search passed by. At the end of the hour I went back to the Greens, according to promise, having resolved that someone must be sent on to Como to look after the missing article. There was no necessity to knock at their sitting-room door, for it was wide open. I walked in and found Mrs. Green still engaged in attacking the landlord, while all the porters who had carried the luggage up to the house were standing round. Her voice was loud above the others, but luckily for them all she was speaking English. The landlord, I saw, was becoming sulky. He spoke in Italian, and we, none of us, understood him. But I gathered that he was declining to do anything further. The box, he was certain, had never come out of the steamer. The Boots stood by interpreting into French, and, acting as second interpreter, I put it into English. "Mr. Green," said the lady, turning to her husband, "you must go at once to Como." Mr. Green, who was seated on the sofa, groaned audibly, but said nothing. Sophonisba, who was sitting by him, beat upon the floor with both her feet. "Do you hear, Mr. Green?" she said, turning to him. "Do you mean to allow that vast amount of property to be lost without any effort? Are you prepared to replace my jewels?" "Her jewels?" said Sophonisba, looking up into my face. "Papa had to pay for every stitch she had when he married her." These last words were so spoken as to be audible only to me, but her first exclamation was loud enough. Were they people for whom it would be worth my while to delay my journey, and put myself to serious inconvenience with reference to money? A few minutes afterwards I found myself with Green on the terrace before the house. "What ought I to do?" said he. "Go to Como," said I, "and look after your box. I will remain here and go on board the return steamer. It may, perhaps, be there." "But I can't speak a word of Italian," said he. "Take the Boots," said I. but I can't speak a word of French." And then it ended in my undertaking to go to Como. I swear that the thought struck me that I might as well take my portmanteau with me and cut and run when I got there. The greens were nothing to me. I did not, however, do this. I made the poor man a promise, and I kept it. I took merely a dressing bag, for I knew that I must sleep at Como, and thus resolving to disarrange my plans, I started. I was in the midst of beautiful scenery, but I found it quite impossible to draw any enjoyment from it, from that, or from anything around me. My whole mind was given up to anathemas against this odious box, as to which I had undoubtedly heavy cause of complaint. What was the box to me? I went to Como by the afternoon steamer, and spent a long, dreary evening down on the steamboat quays, searching everywhere, and searching in vain. The boat by which we had left Colico had gone back to Colico, but the people swore that nothing had been left on board it. It was just possible that such a box might have gone on to Milan with the luggage of other passengers. I slept at Como, and on the following morning I went to Milan. There was no trace of the box to be found in that city. I went round to every hotel and travelling office, but could hear nothing of it. Parties had gone to Venice and Florence and Bologna, and any of them might have taken the box. No one, however, remembered it, and I returned back to Como, and thence to Bellagio, reaching the latter place at 9 in the evening, disappointed, weary, and cross. "Has Monsieur found the accursed trunk?" said the Bellagio boots, meeting me on the quay. "In the name of the—" "No. Has it not turned up here?" "Monsieur," said the boots, "we shall all be mad soon. The poor master, he is mad already." And then I went up to the house. "My jewels!" shouted Mrs. Green, rushing to me with her arms stretched out as soon as she heard my step on the corridor. I am sure that she would have embraced me had I found the box. I had not, however, earned any such reward. "I can hear nothing of the box either at Como or Milan," I said. "Then what on earth am I to do for my money?" said Mr. Green. I had had neither dinner nor supper, but the elder Greens did not care for that. Mr. Green sat silent in despair, and Mrs. Green stormed about the room in her anger. "I am tired, hungry, and thirsty," said I. I was beginning to get angry and to think myself ill-used, and that idea as to a family of swindlers became strong again. Green had borrowed 10 Napoleons from me before I started for Como, and I had spent above 4 in my fruitless journey to that place and Milan. I was beginning to fear that my whole purpose as to Venice and the Tyrol would be destroyed, and I had promised to meet friends at Innsbruck who were very much preferable to the Greens. As events turned out, I did meet them. Had I failed in this, the present Mrs. Robinson would not now have been sitting opposite to me. I went to my room and dressed myself, and then Sophonisba presided over the tea-table for me. "What are we to do?" she asked me in a confidential whisper. "Wait for money from England." "But they will think that we are all sharpers," she said, "and, upon my word, I do not wonder at it, from the way in which that woman goes on." She then leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table and her face in her hands, and told me a long story of all their family discomforts. Her papa was a very good sort of man, only he had been made a fool of by that intriguing woman who had been left without a sixpence with which to bless herself, and now they had nothing but quarrels and misery. Papa did not always get the worst of it. Papa could rouse himself sometimes, only now he was beaten down and cowed by the loss of his money. This whispering confidence was very nice in its way, seeing that Sophonisba was a pretty girl, but the whole matter seemed to be full of suspicion. "If they didn't want to take you in one way, they did in another," said the present Mrs. Robinson, when I told her the story at Innsbruck. I beg that it may be understood that at the time of my meeting the Greens I was not engaged to the present Mrs. Robinson, and was open to any matrimonial engagement that might have been pleasing to me. On the next morning after breakfast we held a council of war. I had been informed that Mr. Green had made a fortune and was justified in presuming he was a rich man. It seemed to me, therefore, that his course was easy. Let him wait at Bellagio for more money, and when he returned home let him buy Mrs. Green more jewels. A poor man always presumes that a rich man is indifferent about his money, but in truth a rich man never is indifferent about his money, and poor Green looked very blank at my proposition. "Do you mean to say that it's gone forever?" he asked. "I'll not leave the country without knowing more about it," said Mrs. Green. "It certainly is very odd," said Sophonisba. Even Sophonisba seemed to think that I was too offhand. "It will be a month before I can get money, and my bill here will be something tremendous," said Green. "I wouldn't pay them a farthing till I get my box," said Mrs. Green. "That's nonsense," said Sophonisba. And so it was. "Hold your tongue, miss," said the stepmother. "Indeed, I shall not hold my tongue," said the stepdaughter. Poor Green! He had lost more than his box within the last 12 months, for, as I had learned in that whispered communication over the tea-table with Sophonisba, this was in reality her papa's marriage trip. Another day was now gone, and we all went to bed. Had I not been very foolish, I should have had myself called at 5 in the morning, and have gone away by the early boat, leaving my 10 Napoleons behind me. But, unfortunately, Sophonisba had exacted a promise from me that I would not do this, and thus all chance of spending a day or two in Venice was lost to me. Moreover, I was thoroughly fatigued and almost glad of any excuse which would allow me to lie in bed on the following morning. I did lie in bed till 9 o'clock, and then found the Greens at breakfast. Let us go and look at the Cerbaloni Gardens," said I, as soon as the silent meal was over, "or take a boat over to the Somariva Villa." "I should like it so much," said Sophonisba. "We will do nothing of the kind till I have found my property," said Mrs. Green. "Mr. Robinson, what arrangement did you make yesterday with the police at Como?" "The police at Como?" I said. "I did not go to the police." "Not go to the police? And do you mean to say that I am to be robbed of my jewels and no effort made for redress? Is there no such thing as a constable in this wretched country? Mr. Green, I do insist upon it that you at once go to the nearest British consul." "And I suppose I had better write home for money," said he. "And do you mean to say that you haven't written yet?" said I, probably with some acrimony in my voice. "You need not scold Papa," said Sophonisba. "I don't know what I am to do," said Mr. Green, and he began walking up and down the room. But still he did not call for pen and ink, and I began to feel that he was a swindler. Was it possible that a man of business, who had made his fortune in London, should allow his wife to keep all her jewels in a box, and carry about his own money in the same? "I don't see why you need to be so very unhappy, Papa," said Sophonisba. "Mr. Robinson, I'm sure, will let you have whatever money you may want at present." This was pleasant. "And will Mr. Robinson return me my jewels, which were lost, I must say, in a great measure through his carelessness?" said Mrs. Green. This was pleasanter. "Upon my word, Mrs. Green, I must deny that," I said, jumping up. "What on earth could I have done more than I did do? I have been to Milan, and nearly worked myself to death." "Why did you not bring a policeman back with you?" "You would tell everybody on board the boat what there was in it," said I. "I told nobody but you," she answered. "I suppose you mean to imply that I've taken the box," I rejoined. So that on this, the 3rd or 4th day of our acquaintance, we did not go on together quite pleasantly. But what annoyed me perhaps the most was the confidence with which it seemed to be Mr. Green's intention to lean upon my resources. He certainly had not written home yet, and had taken my 10 Napoleons, as one friend may take a few shillings from another when he finds that he has left his own silver on his dressing-table. What could he have wanted of 10 Napoleons? He had alleged the necessity of paying the porters, but the few francs he had in his pocket would have been enough for that. And now Sophonisba was ever and again prompt in her assurances that he need not annoy himself about money, because I was at his right hand. I went upstairs into my own room, and counting all my treasures, found that £36 and some odd silver was the extent of my wealth. With that I had to go, at any rate, as far as Innsbruck, and from thence back to London. It was quite impossible that I should make myself responsible for Green's bill at Bellagio. We dined early, and after dinner, according to a promise made in the morning, Sophonisba ascended with me into the Serbelloni Gardens, and walked around the terraces on that beautiful hill which commands the view of the Nino Lakes. When we started, I confess that I would sooner have gone alone, for I was sick of the Greens in my very soul. We had had a terrible day. The landlord had been sent for so often that he refused to show himself again. The landlady, though matrons of that class are always courteous, had been so driven that she snapped her fingers in Mrs. Green's face. The 3 girls would not show themselves. The waiters kept out of the way as much as possible, and the boots, in confidence, abused them to me behind their back. "Monsieur," said the boots, "do you think there ever was such a box?" "Perhaps not," said I. "And yet I knew that I had seen it." I would, therefore, have preferred to walk without Sophonisba, but that now was impossible. So I determined that I would utilize the occasion by telling her of my present purpose. I had resolved to start on the following day, and it was now necessary to make my friends understand that it was not in my power to extend to them any further pecuniary assistance. Sophonisba, when we were on the hill, seemed to have forgotten the box, and to be willing that I should forget it also. But that was impossible. When, therefore, she told me how sweet it was to escape from that terrible woman, and leaned on my arm with all the freedom of old acquaintance, I was obliged to cut short the pleasure of the moment. "I hope your father has written that letter," said I. "He means to write it from Milan. We know you want to get on, so we propose to leave here the day after tomorrow." "Oh," said I, thinking of the bill immediately, and remembering that Mrs. Green had insisted on having champagne for dinner. "And if anything more is to be done about the nasty box, it will be done there," returned Sophonisba. "But I must go tomorrow," said I, "at 5 a.m. "Nonsense," said Sophonisba. "Go tomorrow when we, are going on the next day?" "And I might as well explain," said I, gently dropping the hand that was on my arm, that I find it will be impossible for me to what? To advance Mr. Green any more money just at present." Then Sophonisba's arm dropped all at once, and she exclaimed, "Oh, Mr. Robinson!" After all, there was a certain hard good sense about Miss Green, which would have protected her from any evil thoughts, had I known all the truth. I found out afterwards that she was a considerable heiress, and, in spite of the opinion expressed by the present Mrs. Robinson when Miss Walker, I do not for a moment think she would have accepted me had I offered to her. "You are quite right not to embarrass yourself," she said, when I explained to her my immediate circumstances. "But why did you make Papa an offer for which you cannot perform? He must remain here now till he hears from England. Had you explained it all at first, the 10 Napoleons would have carried us to Milan." This was all true, and yet I thought it hard upon me. It was evident to me that Sophonisba was prepared to join her stepmother in thinking that I had ill-treated them, and I had not much doubt that I should find Mr. Green of the same opinion. There was very little more said between us during the walk, and when we reached the hotel at 7 or 7:30 o'clock, I merely remarked that I would go in and wish her father and mother good-bye. "I suppose you will drink tea with us?" said Sophonisba, and to this I assented. I went into my room and put all my things into a portmanteau, for, according to the custom which is invariable in Italy when an early start is premeditated, the Boots was imperative in his demand that the luggage should be ready overnight. I then went to the Greens' sitting-room and found that the whole party was now aware of my intention. "So you were going to desert us?" said Mr. Green. "I must go on upon my journey," I pleaded, in a weak, apologetic voice. "Go on upon your journey, sir," said Mrs. Green. "I would not for a moment have you put yourself to inconvenience on our account." And yet I had already lost 14 Napoleons and given up all prospect of going to Venice. "Mr. Robinson is certainly right not to break the engagement with Miss Walker," said Sophonisba. Now, I had said not a word about an engagement with Miss Walker, having only mentioned incidentally that she would be one of the party at Innsbruck. "But," continued she, "I think he should not have misled us." And in this way we enjoyed our evening meal. I was just about to shake hands with them all, previous to my final departure from their presence, when the Boots came into the room. "I'll leave the portmanteau till tomorrow morning," said he. "All right," said I. "Buami," said he, "there will be such a crowd of things in the hall. The big trunk I will take away now." "Big trunk? What big trunk?" "The trunk with your rug over it, on which the portmanteau stood." I looked around at Mr., Mrs. and Miss Green, and saw that they were all looking at me. I looked round at them, and as their eyes met mine I felt that I turned as red as fire. I immediately jumped up and rushed away to my own room, hearing as I went that all their steps were following me. I rushed to the inner recess, pulling down the portmanteau, which still remained in its old place, tore away my own carpet rug which covered the support beneath it, and there saw a white canvas-covered box with a hole in the canvas on the side next to me. "It is my box!" said Mrs. Green, pushing me away as she hurried up and put her fingers within the rent. "Certainly does look like it," said Mr. Green, peering over his wife's shoulder. "There's no doubt about the box," said Sophonisba. "Not the least in life," said I, trying to assume an indifferent look. "Mon Dieu!" said the Boots. "Corpo di Bacco!" exclaimed the landlord, who had now joined the party. "Oh!" screamed Mrs. Green, and she threw herself back onto my bed and shrieked hysterically. There was no doubt whatsoever about the facts. There was the lost box, and there it had been during all those tedious hours of unavailing search. While I was suffering all that fatigue in Milan, spending my precious zwanzigers in driving about from one hotel to another, the box had been standing safe in my own room at Bellagio, hidden by my own rug. And now that it was found, everybody looked at me as though it were all my fault. Mrs. Green's eyes, when she had done being hysterical, were terrible, and Sophonisba looked at me as though I were a convicted thief. "Who put the box here?" I said, turning round fiercely upon the Boots. "I did," said the Boots, "by Monsieur's express orders." "By my order?" I exclaimed. "Certainly," said the Boots. "Corpo di Bacco," said the landlord, and he looked at me as though I were a thief. In the meantime, the landlady and the 3 daughters had clustered round Mrs. Green, administering to her all manner of Italian consolation. The box and the money and the jewels were, after all, a reality, and much incivility can be forgiven to a lady who has really lost her jewels and has really got them again. There and then there arose a hurly-burly among us as to the manner in which the odious trunk found its way into my room. Had anybody been just enough to consider the matter coolly, it must have been quite clear that I could not have ordered it there. When I entered the hotel, the boxes were already being lugged about, and I had spoken a word to no one concerning them. That traitorous Boots had done it, no doubt without malice prepense, but he had done it. And now the Greens were once more known as moneyed people. He turned upon me and told me to my face that I had desired that box to be taken to my own room as part of my own luggage. "My dear," said Mr. Green, turning to his wife, "you should never mention the contents of your luggage to anyone." "I never will again," said Mrs. Green, with a meek, repentant air. "But I really thought—" "One can never be sure of strangers," said Mr. Green. "That's true," said Mrs. Green. "And after all, it may have been accidental," said Sophonisba, on hearing which good-natured surmise both Papa and Mamma Green shook their suspicious heads. I was resolved to say nothing then. It was all but impossible that they should really think that I had intended to steal their box. Nor, if they did think so, would it have become me to vindicate myself there, before the landlord and all his servants. I stood by, therefore, in silence, while two men raised the trunk, and joined the procession which followed it as it was carried out of my room into that of its legitimate owners. Everybody in the house was there by that time, and Mrs. Green, enjoying her triumph, by no means grudged them the entrance into the sitting-room. She had felt that she was suspected, and now she was determined that the world of Bellagio should know how much she was above suspicion. The box was put down upon two chairs. The supporters who had borne it retired a pace each. Mrs. Green then advanced proudly with the selected key, and Mr. Green stood by her right shoulder, ready to secure his portion of the hidden treasure. Sophonisba was now indifferent, and threw herself on the sofa, while I walked up and down the room thoughtfully, meditating what words I would say when I took my last farewell of the Greens. But as I walked I could see what occurred. Mrs. Green opened the box, and displayed to view the ample folds of a huge yellow woolen dressing-gown. I would fancy that she would not willingly have exhibited this article of her toilet had she not felt that its existence would speedily be merged in the presence of the glories which were to follow. This had merely been the padding at the top of the box. Under that lay a long papier-mâché case, and in that were all her treasures. "Ah, they are safe," she said, opening the lid and looking upon her tawdry pearls and carbuncles. Mr. Green, in the meantime, well knowing the passage for his hand, had dived down to the very bottom of the box, and seized hold of a small canvas bag. "It is here," he said, dragging it up, "and as far as I can tell as yet, the knot has not been untied." Whereupon he sat himself down by Sophonisba, and, employing her to assist in holding them, began to count his rolls. "They are all right," said he, and wiped the perspiration from his brow. I had not yet made up my mind in what manner I might best utter my last words among them, so as to maintain the dignity of my character. And now I was standing over against Mr. Green, with my arms folded on my breast. My arms were folded on my breast, and I had in my face a frown of displeasure, which I am able to assume upon occasions, but I had not yet determined what words I would use. After all, perhaps it might be as well that I should leave them without any last words. "Green, my dear," said the lady, "pay the gentleman his 10 Napoleons." "Oh, yes, certainly." Whereupon Mr. Green undid one of the rolls and extracted 8 sovereigns. "I believe that will make it right, sir," said he, handing them to me. I took the gold, slipped it with an indifferent air into my waistcoat pocket, and then refolded my arms across my breast. "Papa," said Sophonisba, in a very audible whisper, "Mr. Robinson went for you to Como. Indeed, I believe he says he went to Milan." "Do not let that be mentioned," said I. "By all means pay him his expenses," said Mrs. Green. "I would not owe him anything for worlds." "He should be paid," said Sophonisba. "Oh, certainly," said Mr. Green, and he at once extracted another sovereign and tendered it to me in the face of the assembled multitude. This was too much. "Mr. Green," said I intended to be of service to you when I went to Milan, and you are very welcome to the benefit of my intentions. The expense of that journey, whatever may be its amount, is my own affair. And I remained standing with my closed arms. We will be under no obligations to him, said Mrs. Green, and I shall insist on his taking the money. The servant will put it on his dressing table, said Sophonisba, and she handed the sovereign to the boots, giving him instructions. Keep it to yourself, Antonio, I said, whereupon the man chucked it to the ceiling with his thumb, caught it as it fell, and with a well-satisfied air dropped it into the recesses of his pocket. The heir of the Greens was also well satisfied, for they felt that they had paid me in full for all my service. And now, with many obsequious bows and assurances of deep respect, the landlord and his family withdrew from the room. Was there anything else they could do for Mrs. Green? Mrs. Green was all affability. She had shown her jewels to the girls, and allowed them to express their admiration in pretty Italian superlatives. There was nothing else she wanted tonight. She was very happy, and liked Bellagio. She would stay yet a week, and would make herself quite happy. And though none of them understood a word that the other said, each understood that things were now rose-coloured, and so, with scrapings, bows, and grinning smiles, the landlord and all his myrmidons withdrew. Mr. Green was still counting his money, sovereign by sovereign, and I was still standing with my folded arms upon my bosom. "I believe I may now go," said I. "Good night," said Mrs. Green. "Adieu," said Sophonisba. "I have the pleasure of wishing you good-bye," said Mr. Green. And then I walked out of the room. After all, what was the use of saying anything? And what could I say that would have done me any service? If they were capable of thinking me a thief, which they certainly did, nothing that I could say would remove the impression. Nor, as I thought, was it suitable that I should defend myself from such an imputation. What were the Greens to me? So I walked slowly out of the room, and never again saw one of the family from that day to this. As I stood upon the beach the next morning, while my portmanteau was being handed into the boat, I gave the boots 5 zwanzigers. I was determined to show him that I did not condescend to feel anger against him. He took the money, looked into my face, and then whispered to me, "Why did you not give me a word of notice beforehand?" said he, and winked his eye. He was evidently a thief, and took me to be another. But what did it matter? I went thence to Milan, in which city I had no heart to look at anything, thence to Verona, and so over the pass to the Brenner to Innsbruck. When I once found myself near to my dear friends the Walkers, I was again a happy man, and I may safely declare that though a portion of my journey was so troublesome and unfortunate, I look back upon that tour as the happiest and the luckiest epoch of my life. The end. There you go. A long old tale about nothing much. Right. That went about as long as expected, so I'm going to stretch. Stressful? Yep. I'm going to stretch, and I'm going to go to a break. Encourage you all to do the same. Cycle your fluids, rotate your legs. Broke a cat. And I'll see you back here in 5 minutes. Bye, Finn. We're back. Hello. Welcome back. How are all doing? Had a good break? I see we have continued to drop frames, which makes me sad. And yeah, I'm gonna keep going on about it because I'm gonna need to try and figure it out. Probably by the next stream. I don't know. So yeah, I've got ideas in mind for what I can do to try and sort it out, because it's a real pain. I don't know what's causing it. But hello, welcome back. I hope everyone enjoyed the first story. The next one, don't worry, is a lot shorter. Oh, did I not pin it? Did I not do that? There we go. Yeah, I'll get onto it in a second. But yeah, I realise that there's a bit of a theme for this evening of these two stories, which I am broadly calling Farcical Finances, because when titling something, it's important that it alliterate, and so there we go. And you know, either alliterate or rhyme, and funny money gets used a lot by everyone all the time for everything. It feels a little bit played out. Oh, we're dropping more frames, are we, OBS? That's great, thank you. Yeah, you keep that up. Why does this? Oh, stream health indicator like dips, and I don't. It upsets me. It bothers me. Well, then, before that's allowed to sabotage yet more of the stream, shall we go on to the next story, which, as I say, is shorter, but it's going to be its own kind of unique challenge, because the entire thing is written in accent. So you get to listen to me do that for the next 20 minutes, half hour or so. So, if we are ready, if we're all back from the break and things have been done that needed to be done and settled and clicked on stories if you want them or what have you, me accent, let's go. Well, you might not. I don't know how you feel about this one, because this feels like a little bit like it's written by some sort of Guy Ritchie cheeky Cockney character, and so I'm going to be leaning a little bit on that, which means kind of talking a little bit like the rest of my family does, because they're all from that end of London, innit? Kinda. Not quite as strongly now as it probably were when they were younger, but you know, here we go. If we're all sitting comfortably and all ready and happy, I've got to get into it now, so I take a little bit of a run up for the story, right? If we're all sitting comfortably and listening and ready for me to go on, this is Bill's Paper Chase by W. Jacobs. Sailormen have their faults, said the night watchman. Frankly, I'm not denying it. I used to behave myself when I was at sea, but being close with money is a fault that can seldom be brought again 'em. I saved some money once, 2 golden sovereigns owing to a hole in my pocket. Before I got another ship, I slept 2 nights on a doorstep and had nothing to eat, and I found them 2 sovereigns in the lining of my coat when I was over 2,000 miles away from the nearest pub. I only knew one miser in all the years I was at sea. Thomas Geary, his name was, and we were shipmates aboard the barque Grenada, homeward bound from Sydney to London. Thomas was a man that was getting into years. 60, I think he was, and old enough to know better. He'd been saving hard for over 40 years, and as near as we could make out, he was worth a matter of £600. He used to be fond of talking about it, and letting us know how much better off he was than any of the rest of us. We was about a month out from Sydney when old Thomas took sick. Bill Hicks said it was owing to the halfpenny he couldn't account for, but Walter Jones, whose family was always ill and thought he knew a lot about it, said that he knew what it was, but he couldn't remember the name of it, and that when we got to London and Thomas saw a doctor, we should see as how he was right. Whatever it was, the old man got worse and worse. The skipper came down and gave him some physic and looked at his tongue, and then he looked at our tongues and to see what the difference was. Then he left the cook in charge of him and went off. The next day, Thomas was worse, and it was soon clear to everybody but him that he was slipping his cable. He wouldn't believe it at first, though the cook told him. Bill Hicks told him, and Walter Jones had a grandfather that went off in just the same way. "I'm going to die," says Thomas. "How can I die and leave all that money?" "It'll be good for your relations, Thomas," says Walter Jones. "I ain't got any," says the old man. "Well, you're friends then, Thomas," says Walter, soft-like. "I ain't got any," says the old man again. "Yes, you have, Thomas," says Walter with a kind smile. "I tell you one you've got." Thomas shut his eyes at him and began to talk pitiful about his money and the hard work he'd had saving of it. By and by he got worse and didn't recognise us, but thought we was a pack of greedy, drunken sailormen. He thought Walter Jones was a shark and told him so, and try all he could, Walter couldn't persuade him different. He died the day after. In the morning he was whimpering about his money again, and angry with Bill when he reminded him that he couldn't take it with him, and he made Bill promise that he should be buried just as he was. Bill tucked him up after that, and when he felt a canvas bag tied around the old man's waist, he began to see what he was driving at. Not Michael Caine, shut up. The weather was dirty that day, and there was a bit of sea running. Consequently, all hands was on deck, and a boy of about 16, what used to help the steward down aft, was looking after Thomas. Me and Bill just run down to give a look at the old man in time. "I am going to take it with me, Bill," says the old man. "That's right," says Bill. "My mind's easy now," says Thomas. "I gave it to Jimmy to throw overboard for me." "What?" says Bill, staring. "That's right, Bill," says the boy. "He told me to. It was a little packet of banknotes. He gave me 2pence for doing it." Old Thomas seemed to be listening. His eyes was open and he looked artful at Bill to think what a clever thing he'd done. "Nobody's going to spend my money," he says. "Nobody's." We drew back from his bunk and stood staring at him. Then Bill turned to the boy. "Go and tell the skipper he's gone," he says. "And mind, for your own sake, don't tell the skipper or anybody else you've thrown that money overboard." "Why not?" says Jimmy. "Because you'll be locked up for it," says Bill. "You'd no business to do it. You've been and broke the law. It ought to have been left for somebody." Jimmy looked scared, and after he was gone I turned to Bill and I looks at him and I says, "What's the little game, Bill?" "Game?" said Bill, snorting at me. "I don't want the poor boy to get into trouble, do I? Poor little chap. You was young yourself once." "Yeah," I says. "I'm a little bit older now, Bill, and unless you tell me what your little game is, I shall tell the skipper myself, and the chaps too. Poor old Thomas told him to do it. Where's the boy to blame?" "Do you think Jimmy did?" says Bill, screwing up his nose at me. "That little varmint is walking around worth 600 quid. Now you keep your mouth shut, and I'll make it worth your while." Then I see Bill's game. "All right, I'll keep quiet for the sake of my half," I says, looking at him. I thought he'd have choked at the I thought he'd have choked, and the language he see fit to use is almost as much as I could answer. "Very well then," he says at last. "Halves it is. It ain't robbery because it belongs to nobody, and it ain't the boy's because he was told to throw it overboard." They buried poor old Thomas the next morning, and after it was all over, Bill put his hand on the boy's shoulder, and they walked forward, and he says, "Poor old Thomas has gone to look for his money," he says. "Wonder where we'll find it. Was it a big bundle, Jimmy?" "No," says the boy, shaking his head. "There were £600 notes and 2 sovereigns, and I wrapped the sovereigns up in the notes to make them sink. Fancy throwing away money like that, Bill. Seems a sin, don't it?" Bill didn't answer him, And that afternoon, the other chaps below being asleep, we searched his bunk through and through without any luck. And at last, Bill sat down and swore he must have got it about him. We waited till night, and when everybody was snoring hard, we went over to the boy's bunk and went all through his pockets and felt the linings. And then we went back to our side, and Bill said what he thought about Jimmy in whispers. "Must have got it tied round his waist next to his skin like Thomas had," I says. We stood there in the dark, whispering, and then Bill couldn't stand it any longer, and he went over on tiptoe to the bunk again. He was trembling with excitement, and I wasn't much better, when all of a sudden the cook sat up in his bunk with a dreadful laughing scream and called out that somebody was tickling him. I got into my bunk, and Bill got into his, and we lay there listening while the cook, who was a terrible ticklish man, leaned out of his bunk and said what he'd do if it happened again. "Go to sleep," says Walter Jones. "You're dreaming. Who do you think would want to tickle you?" "I'll tell you," says the cook. "Somebody come over and tickled me with the hand the size of a leg of a mutton. Felt creepy all over." Bill gave it up for the night, but the next day he pretended to think Jimmy was getting fat, and he caught hold of him and prodded him all over. He thought he felt something round his waist, but he couldn't be sure, and Jimmy made such a noise that the other chaps interfered and told Bill to leave him alone. For a whole week we tried to find that money and couldn't, and Bill said it was a suspicious thing that Jimmy kept after a good deal more than he used to, and that he got the idea that the boy might have hidden it somewhere there. At the end of that time, however, owing to our being short-handed, Jimmy was sent forward to work as ordinary seaman, and it began to be quite noticeable the way he avoided Bill. At last, one day, we got him down to the forecastle, and Bill put his arm round him and got him on the locker and asked him straight out where the money was. "Why, I chucked it overboard," he says. "I told you so afore. What a memory you've got, Bill." Bill picked him up and laid him on the locker, and we searched him thoroughly. We even took his boots off, and then we had another look in his bunk while he was putting them on again. "If you're innocent," says Bill, "why don't you call out, eh?" "Because you told me not to say anything about it, Bill," says the boy. "But I will next time. Loud, I will." "Look here," says Bill. "You tell us where it is, and the three of us will go shares in it. That'll be £200 each, and we'll tell you how to get yours changed without getting caught. We're cleverer than you are, you know." "I know that, Bill," says the boy, "but it's no good telling me your lies. No good me telling you lies. I chucked it overboard." "Very good then," says Bill, getting up. "I'm going to tell the skipper." "Tell him," says Jimmy. "I don't care." "Then you'll be searched after you step ashore," says Bill. "And you won't be allowed on the ship again. You'll lose it by being greedy, whereas if you go shares with us, you'll have £200. I could see as how the boy hadn't thought of that, and try as he would, he couldn't hide his feelings. He called Bill a red-nosed shark, and he called me something that I've forgotten now. "Think it over," says Bill. "Mind, you'll be collared as soon as you left the gangway and searched by the police." "And will they tickle the cook too, I wonder?" says Jimmy savagely. "And if they find it, you'll go to prison," says Bill, giving him a clump on the side of the head. "And you won't like that, I can tell you." "Why, ain't it nice, Bill?" says Jimmy, holding his ear. Bill looks at him, and then he steps to the ladder. "I'm not going to talk to you any more, my lad," he says. "I'm going to tell the skipper." Well, he went up, slowly, and just as he reached the deck, Jimmy started up and called him. Bill pretended not to hear, and the boy ran up on the deck and followed him, and after a little while they both came down again together. "You wish to speak to me, my lad?" says Bill, holding his head up. "Yeah," says the boy, fiddling with his fingers. "If you keep your ugly mouth shut, we'll go shares." "Oh," says Bill, "I thought you throwed it overboard." "I thought so too, Bill," says Jimmy very softly, "and when I came below again I found it in my trousers pocket." "Where is it now?" says Bill. "Never mind where it is," says the boy. "You couldn't get it if I was to tell you. It would take me all my time to do it myself." "Where is it?" says Bill again. "I'm going to take care of it. I won't trust you." "I can't trust you," says Jimmy. "And if you don't tell me where it is this minute," says Bill, moving to the ladder again, "I'm off to tell the skipper. I want it in my hands, or at any rate my share of it." "Why not share it out now?" "Because I haven't got it," says Jimmy, stamping his foot. That's why. And it's all your silly fault. After you came pouring through my pockets when you thought I was asleep, I got frightened and hid it. Where? Says Bill. In the second mate's mattress, says Jimmy. I was tidying up down aft and I found a hole in the underneath side of his mattress, and I shoved it in there, poked it in with a bit of stick. And how are you going to get it? Says Bill, scratching his head. That's what I don't know, seeing that I'm not allowed aft now, says Jimmy. One of us will have to make a dash for it when we get to London. And mind if there's any hanky-panky on your part, Bill, I'll give the show away myself. The cook came down just then, and we had to leave off talking, and I could see that Bill was so pleased at finding that the money hadn't been thrown overboard that he was losing sight of the difficulty of getting it. In a day or two, however, he see it as plain as me and Jimmy did, and as time went by, he got desperate and frightened us both by hanging about aft every chance he got. The companionway faced the wheel, and there was about as much chance of getting down there without being seen as there would be of taking a man's false teeth out of his mouth without his knowing it. Jimmy went down one day while Bill was at the wheel to look for his knife, what he thought he'd left down there, and he'd hardly got down before Bill saw him coming up again, holding onto the top of a mop which the steward was using. We couldn't figure it out, nohow. And to think of the second mate, a little man with a large family who never had a penny in his pocket, sleeping every night on a £600 mattress, sent us pretty near crazy. We used to talk it over whenever we got a chance, and Bill and Jimmy could scarcely be civil to each other. The boy said it was Bill's fault, and he said it was the boy's. The only thing I can see, says the boy one day, is for Bill to have a touch of sunstroke as he's leaving the wheel one day, tumble head first down the companionway and injure himself so severely that he can't be moved. And then they'll put him in the cabin down aft, and perhaps I'll have to go and nurse him. Anyway, he'll be down there. It's a very good idea, Bill, I says. Oh, says Bill, looking at me as if he would eat me. Why don't you do it then? I'd sooner you did it, Bill, says the boy, so I don't mind which it is. Why not toss up for it? Get away, says Bill. Get away before I do something you won't like, you bloodthirsty little murderer. I've got a plan myself, he says in a low voice after the boy had hopped off. And if I can't think of nothing better, I'll try it. And mine's not a word to the boy. He didn't think of nothing better, and one night, just as we were making the channel, he tried his plan. He was in the second mate's watch, and by he leans over the wheel and says to him in a low voice, "It's my last voyage, sir." "Oh," says the second mate, who was a man as didn't mind talking to a man before the mast. "How's that?" "I've got a berth ashore, sir," says Bill, "and I wanted to ask a favour, sir." Second mate growled and walked off a pace or two. I've never been so happy as I've been on this ship," says Bill. "None of us have. We was saying so the other night, and everybody agreed as it was owing to you, sir, and your kindness to all of us." The second mate coughed, but Bill could see as he was a bit pleased. "The feeling came over me," says Bill, "that when I leave the sea for good, I'd like to have something of yours to remember you by, sir. And it seemed to me that if I had your mattress, I should think of you every night of my life." "My what?" says the second mate, staring at him. "Your mattress, sir," says Bill. "If I might make so bold as to offer £1 for it, sir. I want something what's been used by you, and I've got a fancy for that as a keepsake." The second mate shook his head. "I'm sorry, Bill," he says gently, "but I couldn't let it go at that." "I'd sooner pay 30 shillings than not have it, sir," says Bill humbly. "I gave a lot of money for that mattress," says the mate again. "I forget how much, but a lot. You don't know how valuable that mattress is." "I know it's a good one, sir, else why would you have it?" says Bill. "Would a couple of pounds buy it, sir?" Second mate hummed and hawed, but Bill was afeard to go any higher. So far as he could make out from Jimmy, the mattress was worth about 18p to anybody who wasn't particular. "I've slept on that mattress for years," says the second mate, looking at him from the corner of his eye. "I don't believe I could sleep on another." "Still, to oblige you, Bill, you shall have it at that if you don't want it till we go ashore." "Thank ye, sir," says Bill, hardly able to keep from dancing. I'll hand over the £2 when we're paid off. I shall keep it all my life, sir, in memory of you and your kindness." "And mind you keep quiet about it," says the second mate, who didn't want the skipper to know what he'd been doing. "I don't want to be bothered by the other men wanting to buy things as keepsakes." Bill promised him like a shot, and when he told me about it, he was nearly crying with joy. "And mind," he says, "I bought that mattress, bought it as it stands, and it's got nothing to do with Jimmy. We'll each pay £1 and half what's in it." He persuaded me at last, but that boy watched us like a cat watching a couple of canaries, and I could see as we should have all we could do to deceive him. He seemed more suspicious of Bill than me, and he kept worrying us nearly every day to know what we were going to do. We beat about in the channel with a strong headwind for 4 days, and then a tug picked us up and towed us to London. The excitement at that last little bit was horrible. First of all, we had to get the mattress, and then in some way we had to get rid of Jimmy. Bill's idea was for me to take him ashore, and for me to take him ashore with me and tell him that Bill would join us afterwards, and then lose him. But I said that till I got my share, I couldn't bear to lose sight of Bill's honest face for half a second. And besides, Jimmy wouldn't have gone. All the way up the river he stuck to Bill and kept asking him what we were to do. He was half crying, and so excited that Bill was afraid the other chaps would notice it. We got to our berth in the East India Docks at last, and after we were made fast, we went below to have a wash and change into our shore-going togs. Jimmy watched us all the time, and then he comes up to Bill biting his nails and says, "How's it to be done, Bill?" "Hang about after the rest have gone ashore and trust to luck," says Bill, looking at me. "We'll see how the land lays when we draw our advance." We went down aft to draw 10 shillings each to go ashore with. Bill and me got ours first, and then the second mate who had tipped him the wink followed us out unconcerned-like and handed Bill the mattress rolled up in a sack. "Here you are, Bill," he says. "Much obliged, sir," says Bill, and his hands trembled so as he could hardly hold it, and he made to go off before Jimmy come on deck. Then that fool of a mate kept us there while he made a little speech. Twice Bill made to go off, but he put his hand on his arm and kept him there while he told him how he'd always tried to be liked by the men and had generally succeeded, and in the middle of it up popped Master Jimmy. He gave a start as he saw the bag and his eyes opened wide, and then as we walked forward he put his arm through Bill's and called him all the names he could think of. "You steal the milk out of a cat's saucer," he says, "but mind you don't leave this ship till I've got my share." "I meant it for a pleasant surprise for you, Jimmy," says Bill, trying to smile. "I don't like your surprises, Bill, so I don't deceive you," says the boy. "Where are you going to open it?" "I was thinking of opening it in my bunk," says Bill. "Police might want to examine it if we took it through the dock." "Come on, Jimmy, old man." "Yeah, all right," says the boy, nodding his head at him. "I'll stay up here." "You might forget yourself, Bill, if I trusted myself down there with you alone. You can throw my share up to me, and then you'll leave the ship before I do, see?" "Go to blazes," says Bill. And then, seeing that the last chance had gone, we went below and he chucked the bundle in his bunk. There was only one chap down there, and after spending the best part of 10 minutes doing his hair, he nodded to us and went off. Half a minute later, Bill cut open the mattress and began to search through the stuffing while I struck matches and watched him. It wasn't a big mattress and there wasn't much stuffing, but we couldn't seem to see that money. Bill went all over it again, and then he stood up and looked at me and caught his breath painful. "You think the mate found it?" he says in a husky voice. We went through it again, and then Bill went halfway up the forecastle ladder and called softly for Jimmy. He called 3 times, and then, with a sinking sensation in his stomach, he went up on deck and I followed him. The boy was nowhere to be seen. All we saw was the ship's cat having a wash and brush up before going ashore, and the skipper standing aft talking to the owner. We never saw that boy again. He never turned up for his box, and he didn't show up to draw his pay. Everybody else was there, of course, and after I got mine and I come outside, I see poor Bill with his back up against the wall, staring hard at the second mate, who was looking at him with a kind smile and asking him how he'd slept. Last thing I saw of Bill, the poor chap had got his hands in his trouser pockets and was trying his hardest to smile back. The end. Thank you for listening. Look at that. Bang on time, almost, in 2 minutes. Dave, thank you. Welcome for the raid. You're here now, and your viewers too. Hi, welcome in, everybody. Second mate, you need one mate first. Right, you're not a moderator here. You have no power here. I can ban you. I can do that. What is... hi. Hello, welcome in. You've got so many new toys. Oh, right. How many incredible new bot commands has Dave made that are definitely not purloined from the Longest John's gaming one? Because I was there. I heard you say all the ones on Longest John's, all the ones you enjoy from there, we can remake those. And I'm like, oh, can you? Can you indeed? Wow. Admitting to theft here on the internet. Hi. They are unique, all yours. Oh yeah. Like that emote of me dabbing. Or the emote that I drew of mugging to receive my payment. Don't have any of the Longest John gaming ones? No, because they're on Dave's channel now. Hi, welcome in. You've joined us at the end of the stream. The stream of 1,931 dropped frames. Incredible. I'm going to keep on about this until... Reverse raid? No, you can... No, stop. You're not allowed to take our raiders, our viewers. Stop that. No. Nobody follow Dave. Unfollow Dave right now if you're following him. Go over to that channel and click that heart to unfollow his channel. Thank you. I appreciate that. Hi, everybody. I'm assuming you know who we are and what goes on here. This is chilliteracy.twitch.tv.com. And I, Sam, with my partner Lucy, we read stories here, and like not all of them in silly accents, but that one was written in such an accent, and so it behooved me to read it as such. Hi, welcome. But yeah, that's what we do here, twice a week as much as we can. And it's this for 2 hours. So yeah, welcome. Hi, hello. I hope that the bot sculpting, as I'm going to call it, was good and successful, and you're happy with the results, having given the moderators many fun new toys to play with for the next stream, and then many commands to have forgotten about by the one after that. I expect. So, with that done and said, and the usual barbs dispensed, I am going to call the stream end. Where would we like to... Did I? Didn't. Imagined. Where should we go? Should we go and see... Should we go and see Skittle? Skittle's usually a nice place to go and hang out with afterwards on a... Dark Fist? Max is playing Abiotic Factor? Are they? Oh, so they are. Alright. We're going to see Max then. Is that where we'd like to go? Abiotic Factor is a good game. You get a list. Great. That's... I'm happy for you. Everybody loves list. Right. France? Or other? I don't know. And I feel like I'm in a constant cycle of remembering things that I need to do or want to do and then forgetting about them, which is really starting to bother me. Because something that has been said has reminded me of a thing that I need to do, and then it's gone again. This is causing me some amount of discomfort and distress. What was I just thinking? Was it just the title that I was going to give this stream when I put it over on YouTube? I don't know. Hashtag ADHD. Yeah, it's it sucks. Anyway, let's go. The facts. I got that correct. Dark Fist. they are a cool person. They sometimes play the fiddle, they other times play the video games. They are about alliteration battles. Yeah. I don't know. It will come back to me. Sure, that's how that works, right? But yeah, sending you over to Max Sharkfist. Yeah, they're cool. They play the fiddle. But not often play the fiddle on stream anymore, I think. But they do. Abiotic Factor, which is a cool sci-fi survival game. The vein of Half-Life. Dave and I have played it on Dave's stream a few times. So I'm going to send you over there. I'm not sure what our plans are for next week. They might be a little bit disrupted still. Don't know. We'll see. There will be information on the board. But otherwise, thank you for being here. You've been wonderful, lovely stream. And we'll see you on the next one. Goodbye. And also good night.